morning. Welcome to The Old School, a podcast about, well, really a whole mess of things. Education, philosophy, culture, travel, food, sports. Maybe we'll do a sports episode one day. Good morning here, Dr. Bourgeois.
Hello, Herr Miller. Excuse me. How are you over there, wherever you are?
I'm over here fine. Do you think we could pull off a sports episode?
Well, we could, but we're right in the dog days of nothing right now. I mean, I've been watching old NFL games on the NFL Network from the 1970s or whatever I can find, because there's nothing to watch right now.
Well, personally, I think that's a failing on your part. You seem to not understand that there is actually a lot going on right now.
You're talking about the World Cup women's soccer? Or is that over?
That's most certainly not what I'm discussing. I'm talking about America's pastime.
Wait a minute. You're just dissing women's soccer. A lot of people are watching that quite gleefully as we speak. It's probably like the final weekend. I wouldn't doubt it.
I don't know. I don't know who's watching it. I do not have a hankering to watch it, but
that's odd here, Miller, because you love men's soccer. In fact, you're going to Europe shortly. I don't know who's financing it, but you're like doing this tour of soccer. And it's all men's soccer, so there must be something going on here.
Well, it's not that I don't have an issue with soccer per se, and I don't have an issue with women's soccer per se.
Okay.
I just, for whatever reason, I have not found myself in front of the television watching women's soccer, especially when there's so much baseball to think about. And I can't help but think that the reason why you neglected to consider baseball, one, no doubt a personal failing, but two, you're probably not in your right frame of mind right now. Maybe you're struggling with distress and discomfortability. Maybe you're struggling with depression, perhaps.
You're talking about personal failings twice and now depression. What's going on here, Herr Miller?
Well,
like an intervention or something.
Maybe it is an intervention because I'm worried about you. Because your beloved Pac-12 is disintegrating in front of your eyes. And everything that you've known, everything that you thought was constant in the universe, the things that you held true and dear to your heart, is starting to flitter away. As Arizona now is a part of the Big 12, Arizona State right behind it because they have the same board of regents apparently. Colorado, it's only a matter of time. USC, UCLA, they're already leaving. They're going to the Big 10. What shall become of the Big Pac-12?
Well, it's supposed to be the Pac-8, and that's what I grew up with. I don't recognize Arizona or Arizona State, Colorado.
Very fine people in those colleges.
It's 4 schools in California, and you know who they are. There are 2 in Oregon and 2 in Washington. That's the Pac-8, and that's how it should be, and that's how it always will be in my mind.
Pac-8, those 4 schools in California, is one of them like the Santa Clara Banana Slugs?
No, it's Cal and Stanford, UCLA, USC. Those were the 4. And then you have the 2 great teams in Oregon, the perennial favorites, and then the terrible teams up in Washington that nobody really liked.
There's football players at Cal?
Get out of here. You know that. In fact, the great Aaron Rodgers went to Cal.
That was like 50 years ago.
Well, yeah.
Give me something a little bit closer to the modern day.
No, they hang around quite a long time. And I don't know. I think maybe the Arizona teams were the first in, but I still don't know how they made an agreement with Utah. And Colorado just moves with the wind. You know, they're one time over here, one time over there, so they never were going to stick anyway.
It's the marijuana. You have a hard time focusing when you're on pot.
They didn't have they didn't have any of that. It wasn't invented 50 years ago.
No, it wasn't. Okay.
I don't think so. I never heard about it.
Whatever were those hippies doing then? I don't
Well,
know.
I smelled a lot of that offhand, but I never personally knew what that smell was.
Jeez almighty. Well,
So what were you talking about here, Miller? But no, I don't. I'm not following these. These are rumors, right? Nothing has actually happened yet.
now the Arizona thing, it's happened. The Arizona State thing, it's presumed will happen within the next week or so. Colorado is not definite, but a lot of people think Colorado will too jump to the Big 12. And
When
what's
does this all
interesting is
start?
that say again.
When does this all start? Does it start like on Monday or 2 years from now, or when?
I don't know when the actual date starts. I'm not quite sure, but it'll be interesting because I think I think a lot of people thought that when Texas and Oklahoma said they were leaving for the SEC, I think a lot of people just assumed that the Big 12 would like slowly disintegrate. They didn't seem to be very proactive, but they could find themselves as one of the big power conferences at this rate. At the rate
Which
they're
one?
going, you could see it.
Which I got confused as I was reading a headline. It says the Big Ten Council of Presidents Chancellors voted unanimously on Friday. That's just yesterday, to approve Oregon and Washington to the conference effective August 2nd, 2024.
So they needed to do something. I told you it had to be Oregon and Washington going in tandem.
Well, it was your text message to me that made that happen.
Yes.
But why? So who's left? I mean, is it just going to be Oregon State and
Washington State and the Banana Slugs and San Diego? I don't know. So all this to say, there's a lot of sports going on right now, and so
okay.
So you don't have to content yourself with just reruns of old football games. There's a better world out there waiting for you to discover it.
Well, it's the wonderful world of preseason NFL, which I don't even know why they do it. But they certainly sell tickets and make money from it. But you can watch for about 5 minutes and realize I'm not watching this anymore.
It is criminal that they charge money for preseason games.
Yeah, they should give them away. Bring people in who don't usually go to football games. Let them try it out. They probably never come back after watching that thing.
I don't think it'll ever happen, but it does. It does kind of conjure up a topic, though. And when you talk about buoyed spirits at the onset of a season, typically we're talking baseball. The coming of spring, something anew. Fills the heart, warms the cockles, and makes us feel like there is indeed a God.
Gosh, so you're playing violin music in the background as you talk about. What were you talking about again? You said cockles. You said you lost me on that.
Well, here's where I'm going. So we're going to have a little philosophical discussion, and it came about as part of a discussion I had with a little class I teach with some other adults, and it had to do with the difference between hope and optimism. And the idea, and this would probably take a kind of a philosophical turn, and I don't know how you want to, and we could just see how it goes, develops organically. Well, what would you say is the definition of hope?
I don't know. I'm a pessimist completely, Herr Miller. So these things sound rather similar. I would have trouble differentiating them myself. Hope, optimism.
Well, let's talk about hope first.
Well, I think it means optimism. So I think they are the same thing. And as far as a definition, it's a little bit too early in the day. So I'm going to let you take the first crack at hope. Yeah, I'm a little stuck on that because he threw in optimism, and it seems like it's the same thing.
So, what if I said that the difference between hope and optimism was that hope is typically, when it's expressed, it typically is something that is without basis, that it's more of a wish, it's more of a fervent desire that things turn out how you hope it will. Whereas optimism tends to be something expressed on the basis of evidence, possibility, some sort of reading of the tea leaves that leads us to believe that we have reasons to feel optimistic.
Well, I think you're getting a little bit more nuanced. I don't know if I mean, you hear of somebody being a cockeyed optimist, and so that's like an extreme example of optimism. But either one of them, I mean, I'm actually going to a boxing match tonight, and you've heard of Jake Paul and Nate Diaz because I talked to you about them at length on Thursday when we had breakfast. I remember the date well. It's like it happened yesterday. But I'm not going to put $1,000 on Nate Diaz out of hope, certainly, and even less so out of optimism. So I don't know about having the evidence because it feels like neither of them have much evidence because I'm not putting down the $1,000 unless I have evidence and not just a hunch and a feeling.
But if you had evidence, let's say that you heard that whoever one of these two people are, I don't know, that
Jake
one of
Paul.
them,
Yeah,
again?
Jake, the one's name is Jake Paul, so you can use an actual example in here.
Okay, let's say that you heard through some sort of investigative reporting that Jake Paul hurt his wrist in sparring.
You're saying Jake Paul hurt his wrist? My God.
So what would be the basis for which you would think the other guy would win? And would you consider that to be a matter of optimism or a matter of hope?
Neither. I mean, the problem is that news, once it gets out, it changes the betting line for everybody. So you once again are. It depends on the severity of the injury, and if it's to his left hand or right hand, actually both would be a problem. It just depends on how bad it is, and so I don't know. I probably wouldn't bet at all because suddenly there would be more variables, and when you're betting, you want to eliminate the variables because you're putting up real money.
Okay, perhaps it's too early in the morning for you, but listen.
I know about a place called Hope.
Listen, if you found out that the one guy had a hurt wrist, you would have reasons. This is an expression. You would have reasons for being optimistic.
I'd have reasons to be hopeful. No, I think optimism sounds better in that case. It's a nuance. I'm not comfortable with the word nuance.
But no one would say I have reasons to be hopeful. They typically say I have reasons to be optimistic because optimism typically requires reasons.
That's a good example. So I don't have any reason to be hopeful.
and so that makes it, that then begs the question, is there any merit to being either? And if there is one more than the other, should that be what we strive for? Politicians say, hope and dream and all this other stuff. And the question is, and in their the people who oppose them would say, hope is not a strategy because, the basis of that remark suggests that hope is something that's not grounded in anything, whereas optimism is.
So give another example of these, because I like what you just said, but something. I gave a boxing example, which is a little silly. I give another example to show these differences.
Okay, let's just take it into the most generic way possible. If someone said to you, I hope this turns out, and then someone else says, I'm optimistic that this will turn out, how do you respond to those two statements?
Okay, I'm more likely to believe them if they say I'm optimistic. It seems you're right that there's a little bit more behind it, and you tend to assume that they have their reasons, whereas hope, seems a little bit whimsical in comparison.
Okay. So if we suggest, if we say that optimism is for the sake of things in the future, that optimism is better than hope, can you teach something like that? Do you think, you said yourself that you are by nature a pessimist?
I was joking.
Well, but here's the question. Can you teach optimism? Are some people just born to be optimistic? Are they born to be pessimistic? Just gets into, tabula rasa and Socrates and all this other stuff. But the idea is, do you think that, one, is it something that's within our DNA? And two, do you think it can be taught?
Have you heard the story of the myth of Sisyphus?
No, let's hear it.
Well, I'm terrible at telling stories, but it's a Greek god that was punished for something that I should know at this point. I'm embarrassing myself, but the idea and the image.
Is this the thing about the fire?
No, there's no fire.
Okay.
maybe there's some fire. Settle down, There's no fire. But he was
fire.
Quiet. I'm trying to give a serious allegory here. He was punished, and his punishment was to be forced to push a rock up a hill eternally. And once he got to the top of the hill, the big rock would roll down, and he would walk down the hill again, and then start over and push it up the hill, and it went to eternity. And the philosopher Camus suggested at the end of his very short tale that Sisyphus was an optimist, which is tricky, right? After that type of a fate, why would he be considered an optimist? And the answer to that, he explained, is that there's a moment, and it's not while he's pushing the rock up and thinking, I can do it. And it's not when he is at the top and feels this accomplishment, kind of like Rocky. Isn't that funny? Rocky puts his hands up, right? That's not it. That's not the moment either. But it's when he turns. It's the turn and starts to walk down. And that's the moment of optimism, because it's his rock, it's his fate, and he has control over it. And so this is a moment of power as he's walking down that hill, and then he starts again. So there's an example of existentialist philosophy and the idea of optimism.
Well, it should be noted that Camus, though, also is kind of credited with being either the founding or the main purveyor of absurdism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where does absurdism come into this? I mean, is he really optimistic? Is it something completely different? Is it something that's without reason, without merit, that when he turns around, he's optimistic?
I don't think so. I mean, this it's an absurd example because and that's because it's sort of dramatic, and you would not expect this conclusion to that. You would consider it to be tragic. that there's all this effort and then it's in vain, and then it starts over again and it repeats, but it's not a pleasant experience. But he's suggesting that the idea of exercising your strength and your power, and then as you turn and you that's when you reveal who you are, and that's your fate. And so I don't think that this is that downgrades the myth or this version of the myth, because typically it's presented as a tragedy, as a tragic figure, but he's turning it upside down, as it were.
So we go back to kind of the question: do you think that this is something that can be taught, or is this something that is simply a byproduct of biology? Can you teach someone to be optimistic?
Yeah, I think that in a classroom, there's some of that. It comes out more in athletics and anything that's performative, where you give people the chance to overcome challenges. And I think that optimism comes from this lesson that students, that we all need again and again. It's that when you prepare, when you work, when you struggle, you eventually become successful. And so, yes, I think that if you have repeated experiences like that are actually challenging and not just silly, and so much of what happens in a classroom is not challenging, to anybody, maybe 5% of the students. And so in essence, what happens could be working against that if they're just focusing on a grade and sort of superficial language that you can fill in a bubble sheet. But the beauty of athletics and performing arts is that you have a real challenge. And I think that time and time again, repeat would have the desired effect of building optimism, but an optimism sort of like Sisyphus, where you have control. And I think the control is something that we don't always embed in a classroom. We have students sitting really as talking heads who do what we ask them, but they're not asked to overcome like we're discussing now.
Well, so I guess then the next question is, how valuable is being optimistic in the face of being realistic? We're going to set pessimism aside because I think it's hard to make a decent argument for the value of being pessimistic, although certainly there are people who make that argument. But one of the things that people will often say in contrast to someone that they encounter who is optimistic, they will say, well, I'm a realist. I take the world as it is, or they not only declare themselves to be a follower of realism, but they say morally it's of a higher value than being optimistic. What do you say to that? What should we teach your children?
To be a realist or an optimist, it feels like a realist it's not that exciting a person. We want people who are willing to take risks, and I think that's the exciting part, when they're taking risks and willing to go out on a limb and try things and test their strength. I'm not really sure how to contrast being a realist and apply it to school. I think that this, you mentioned being a pessimist. In some ways, that has more intellectual weight, because usually you don't just have a pessimistic attitude for no reason, but you've thought it through and you've thought it forward. And I think if we were honest in the long run, we're all pessimists because we know what's out there. We know the final possibility, and so in that sense, we're not going to go beyond that, and then I mean, this whole conversation bumps up against religion, which kind of opens that door to something else.
Well, I think with regards to pessimism,
Mhm.
I sometimes feel that pessimism is a bit of a cop out, where people suggest that, pessimism is an excuse for not doing anything. You talked about the idea that on the basis of optimism, people will challenge themselves. People will open themselves up to new possibilities, new boundaries, new horizons. And that because of that, they may be able to break through a situation that the realist or the pessimist would say is not possible to break through. It's just the way it is.
Mhm.
And so to look at pessimism from kind of a moral standpoint, yes, it's a thought process where you look at a series of events and you look at the consequences and you say that these things will never change. But it's also used as an excuse not to do anything. And so, would you consider kind of a flawed moral worldview?
I think that optimism can be heroic, and I mean, I think about I mean my role as a business owner. There's nothing but optimism. I've never gone a month thinking that I'm not going to earn more and make more clients the next month. And if it's a bad month, I'm completely confident, and it's optimism in yourself, which is very different than optimism in the world. I'm not too optimistic about the state of politics and public discourse, and I think we'll be recovering for about 50 years from what's happening right now. So that's not an optimistic, but I'm completely optimistic and confident in what I can control and in my own world. There's no doubt at all, and so yeah, I agree with you. Being pessimistic is similar to being passive, but um, the people that are making things happen are they may not be optimistic about the world, but they're certainly confident in what that they can move the rock.
Well, you think about um, the idea of what is morally valuable.
Mhm.
Can you be optimistic without a kind of moral worldview? Can you be optimistic without a set of beliefs? Does optimism require, you know, this kind of, I'm not saying an orthodoxy necessarily, but like a general sense of belief? Does optimism require that?
I don't think so. I mean, you can be optimistic for a lot of reasons, but somebody who's more of a pragmatist would say it's based upon experience, and you have lots of reasons based upon what you've experienced personally and what you've seen and what you've read and what you've studied. These are going to be the outcomes. So I don't think it's dependent upon in any system of beliefs. It's something that you develop yourself over time, and that's part of being educated and living and having these experiences, and then you gather information every day and every minute, and you have and so it helps your betting odds because you've been through some things and you've had struggles and you've moved past them, and then you realize, okay, I've done this before. I think in the future this is going to be the outcome.
But doing something before doesn't require optimism. Having done something before, that doesn't require anything except for the repeating of what you did the last time. If we're talking about doing something for the first time,
Yeah.
you talked about before that we were starting to go up against the notion of religion. So let's go up against it. I mean, was that comment to suggest that optimism in a general sense requires maybe not like a formal religion, but maybe a system of belief.
It depends on, and we're talking about two separate things here. I mean, we're talking about short-term optimism as you're living, and then the long-term, more existential outcome. But I mean, in the short term, all of these experiences, I mean, I could stop what I'm doing today and say, I'm going to be a conductor. I'm going to, that's going to be how I'm going to support myself the rest of my life. I'm going to go back, get the education in that area, and in time do the networking. And I would be completely confident right now that I could do that. And I know there's a lot of fields that you could just say, based upon what you've done, yes, I can do this, and you could probably even do some pretty outlandish things that are outside of your experience, because you know how to read and think and study and push yourself. The other side of that coin is the long term. Is there's something beyond this life? That's a religious question. It's a metaphysical question. So I don't having metaphysical optimism is a more of a religious notion.
Was it Leibniz? Who I think that's how you say his last name. Leibniz, I think.
Leibniz?
Yes. That that talked about that we live in the best kind of situation.
Oh, the best of all possible worlds.
Yes, the best of all possible worlds. That God created a physical universe that applies, these kind of scientific, measurable type of laws. And so therefore that is, that was his notion of what defined optimism.
Right. Yeah. Just right out of the Enlightenment. I don't know if have you read Candide by Voltaire?
I have.
So he kind of made fun of that notion by showing all these horrible things that happened to the main character and everybody in the middle of wars and famines and terrible things. So the idea of the best of all possible worlds, it's kind of a truism. It's difficult to argue against it, right? But then you have evidence of horrible things happening, but you can't really make a claim. Well, it could be better, maybe.
So what he does in Candide is, he says that because of the minutia, the whole series of things cannot be described as optimistic, and so you can bury yourself into individual incidences or individual scenarios and say this world is shit, or this world is, that there's no redeeming value to say that this cannot possibly be the best of all possible worlds. But that would be kind of ignoring a kind of a larger picture. And perhaps it is a kind of a willing ignoring of contextualism, the notion of what exists around the misery that you see at the very minute level. It doesn't change that something is miserable, but it suggests that in a broader context, that the reasons for optimism are still strong. So take that.
Well, it reminds me of what Nietzsche talked about, amor fati, the love of fate, and suggesting and really agreeing with you that all of the suffering, and it is worthwhile because it leads you to where you are now, and you wouldn't have that if you hadn't gone through all the suffering. I mean, Nietzsche looks at one moment that can justify an entire life, and even to justify one individual can justify history. So he's talking about the looking beyond the suffering. I mean, we kind of demean the whole 20th century if we talk about the lack of suffering that happened, particularly in everywhere. So it's not a question that we can address in a few minutes, but I think we've been talking more personally, and I I would agree, of an optimistic state despite some pretty terrible moments, and that's to me, that what Nietzsche says calls it all into question. I mean, we both had things happen to us that have been really, really challenging, but still remain optimistic about the future despite that.
I think part of I didn't get it from this, but Helen Keller said that her optimism was not based upon the absence of evil,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just the understanding that there is good out there, and there will always be good out there. And if people are willing to kind of work with that, then that's what's going to prevail. As a history teacher or a former history teacher, we've talked about this before. People have asked me about the times that we're living in and say that, there's no reason to be optimistic. I said, there's every reason to be optimistic. Yeah, it's right now, it's horrible, but it's been worse. And we've come through it. And, maybe Helen Keller's and my attitude is based on the notion that there is out there people of goodwill, as I think there are. And as long as there are people of goodwill, yes, you have horrible people, most of them on Twitter. But there's
it's
also
not called Twitter anymore, Miller.
It's not.
It's called, no, you changed the name to X or something like that.
But anyway,
anymore.
It's insensitive to call it Twitter.
What?
It's no. But the idea is that I think that there are more people out there of goodwill than there are crappy people, and that's my reason for optimism. I mean, you see it every time. You see it every time that there is a natural disaster. You see it every time when communities come together. There's not this kind of ferocious attacking of one another. People come together. Now, I wish they came together and stayed together for a long period of time, and they have done that at various moments in history. But I still think that that's part of it. And so, that I think that's where that optimism comes from. And I think Voltaire, as Voltaire was inclined to do, I think sometimes Voltaire went for the cheap shot. He went for the low-hanging fruit. And yes, you can go and see misery. But did you know that there is a happiness index?
Yeah, I've heard about that.
In which they measure the happiness of a country based on what I'm sure are very complicated and scientific indices to then gauge how happy a country is relative to another. And they talked about the idea that inevitably the countries that measure highest on the happiness index are not necessarily, there's some exceptions, but not necessarily the wealthiest countries. That some of these countries that exist at the top of this happiness index are actually quite poor. And I think that kind of goes against what Voltaire says, because it's not a focus on the here and now. It's a focus on what's possible. Focus on, what could be achieved, what people are capable of achieving. But it's also a kind of a note to, you don't need a bunch of stuff to be happy.
Well, now I'm looking at this ranking. I mean, the United States didn't do that badly. I mean, the ones ahead of us, Finland, of course, Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland, the usual. I mean, these are the ones with the good education systems. Sweden, Norway, Israel, New Zealand, Australia, Austria, Ireland, Canada, Germany, and then there we are.
Lithuania. I mean, there's some strange countries on this list.
Notion.
Yes.
Yeah, I need to look at their metrics for sure. But I what you said earlier, I agree. I mean, the news is a terrible way to, the evening news or the all day news, I should say now, is a terrible way to judge the overall state of the world, because it's their job to get people to show that there's terrible things happening and fear, because that's what gets ratings. So I wouldn't give that a lot of thought either. But yeah, what you see talking to people in the grocery store and your neighbors and everybody, there's a lot of kindness. It's just not great news on the TV.
Right.
But there's an image from Schopenhauer, because there is a pessimist right there.
Yes.
And it's I mean, you can read a lot of Schopenhauer and get a lot of examples, but this one is short and simple, and he gave the image of two animals, and I know one is a lion and one is, let's just say it's what type of animal does a lion eat? Say an antelope or something.
Gazelle. Yeah.
Gazelle. Let's go with a gazelle. Sorry. So is what is more intense and stronger and more the joy of the lion, biting into the neck and eating the gazelle, that happiness, or the terror of the gazelle as it's being chased, hunted down, and publicly eaten in front of all his friends. I added that part. But so is the capacity for happiness or pain stronger? And I'm not talking now about animals when I'm talking about humans.
But you're also talking about two things that are instinctual: the notion of staying alive and eating, eating to stay alive, and not being eating to stay alive. You're basically talking about the same dynamic.
Well, physiologically, and also mentally, we worry. That's something that separates us from the animals. They're not thinking, "Oh no, what's this going to be like?" They're right there, but we're not. We're ahead of ourselves and behind ourselves all the time, and so we're driving ourselves mentally crazy with all of this worry. And I think the more self-aware you are, the more you're constantly in the state of worry. And so there's a psychic trauma that's happening constantly, in addition to the potential bad things that it can happen physically.
Well, I don't know if we accomplished anything today.
Oh, I think we did. That poor gazelle would think so.
Well, I would think about the gazelle in the same way that I think about it in terms of, describing human behavior. I mean, where does the greater motivation lie? Is it in not being eaten, or to be able to eat? I've talked about this in terms of human behavior. Who is more motivated, the person taking someone's home or the person defending their home? And I think the latter typically wins out. Golda Meir said, the Israeli prime minister, that our secret weapon is that we have nowhere else to go. This is our home. And so, not to weigh into geopolitical discussions, but I think that that's the larger drive, is to stay alive, to continue to defend. And so, I don't know. Schopenhauer also went Buddhist on us after a while. So I mean, you take some of his. I have to wonder just to what extent Buddhist or pessimistic or optimistic, but so he took his own path, one that diverged a bit from Nietzsche, who was a student, I believe. But perhaps it's for another episode.
I think so, Herr Miller. I'm enlivened. I'm more excited about the future after having this conversation. I'm going to this incredibly exciting boxing match tonight, and I'm not betting a penny because I'm really confused now about the future. And um, but if you can't put money on the table, you're not an optimist, or maybe just you don't have the money to begin with. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, as to the reasons why people don't gamble, I think we can go into a bunch of different reasons for that. But again, perhaps for another episode.
I think so. I think so. Well, we were able to navigate away from baseball, relatively quickly. If you look at the content of this whole show, and I think that's a credit to myself. Even though you disparaged me at the beginning of the program, I can't remember what you said. Something like you need to change your life.
I don't think I said that.
That's how I heard it.
I think you took a pessimistic view towards this conversation, is what I think happened. But
I do, but I was not mocking it. I was blessing it, Herr Miller.
Well,
I appreciate you because it's a risk-taking behavior to bring something like that up. It's more challenging than talking about how desks should be arranged within an elementary school classroom. So good for us.
Good for us. All right. So as we strain our shoulders to clap ourselves on the back, yes. We will venture into sally forth through this beautiful weekend of 107 degree temperatures. And we say so long and adieu, Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
So long yourself, Herr Miller. Auf Wiedersehen.